Sometimes the road signs lie. A few weeks ago, my wife and I went on a road trip for a family reunion in El Paso, Texas. I am now sitting in the hospital waiting room, desperately wishing we hadn't. How much longer? Melanie asked, leaning her seat back and putting her hand into the small of her back in a feeble attempt to find a more comfortable position. Google says we've got a few more hours to go, I said, glancing quickly at my phone sitting in the cup holder, then putting my eyes back to the road. Do we need to stop again? Melanie shifted in her seat a bit, removed her hand from behind her, then sat it back up to its original vertical position. At 7 months pregnant, her options for comfort were quickly dwindling, and none of them involved the front seat of a car. No, let's just go. If we stop again, I'm not going to want to get back into the car. Signal lost. My phone's robotic female voice announced. God damn it, I sighed. The phone had been doing that for the past couple of hours at increasing intervals. There had apparently been an accident or something on the main highway, which would have backed us up by at least an hour, according to Google. In order to avoid that, we'd taken a detour that snaked around the accident through the desert on a 2-lane highway. That had been 3 hours ago, maybe more. It was hard to keep track of when it had happened because even before the phone had alerted us of the accident, the whole trip had been little more than a palette of browns and grays, broken up only by the regular bathroom break. As I saw it, the New Mexico desert was the skid mark on the underpants of America. And if I never had the pleasure of driving through it again, it would be too soon. The sun had set about an hour ago, not long before the signal started getting more spotty, and the highway hypnosis had really started to get to me. There was nothing but desert on either side of us, and even with the high beams on, the darkness covered us like a thick blanket. Got any more Red Bull? I asked. If we're gonna go for a few more hours, I need some wings. Melanie reached into the back seat for a second, grunting with discomfort, then returned with a can of Red Bull. Last one, she said. This was sitting on the seat, so the sun warmed it up for you. Great, I said, taking the can, cracking the seal, and swallowing 3 large gulps. This will sit well with all the other junk I've been eating for the past 2 days. Without a baby on the way, Mel and I could have driven the stretch between Bozeman and El Paso in 2 days without a problem. But with her being as pregnant as she was, we had to carve out almost double the time, and she was still miserable. I let out a burp that tasted like all the atrocious snacks and truck stop food from that day mixed with the warm energy drink I was layering on top. Solemnly, I promised myself I would eat nothing but salad and water for the rest of my life. Turn left here for the Church of Christ. I thought the Church of Christ was back there, Mel said, reading the dilapidated sign as we passed it. No, that was the Church of Jesus Christ, I said. Big difference, apparently. All through the drive, we'd seen a wide variety of local churches, mostly generic, but after passing one called the Church of Liberty over a backdrop of a poorly drawn Confederate flag, we had turned it into a sort of game. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the hum of the engine and the intermittent signal lost notification from my phone. I had looked at the phone earlier when the signal was stronger and saw that we just needed to go to the end of this road, turn right, and we'd find ourselves getting back onto the freeway. That was until we saw a sign that said, "Freeway entrance left 1 mile." I thought you said it was a right at the end of the road, Melanie said, sitting up and grabbing the phone. That's what it said, I insisted. I checked it last time we had service, like half an hour ago. We had about 60 or so miles to go, and then it was a right. How sure are you? She asked, putting the phone back into the cup holder. 'Cause your phone is still saying it has no service, so it's not going to be any help. Pretty damn, I said. Just then we passed another sign. Freeway entrance, left, .5 miles. At least, I think so. I think we should follow the signs, Mel said. I don't want to get lost out here, and the phone hasn't had consistent service in a while. It could have reset and changed routes or something to have us avoid the highway. Remember last time? I did remember last time. A Vegas trip that ended up being 4 hours longer than it should have been because my phone reset and had us taking frontage roads and city streets. It would have been longer had Mel not thought to check the route on her phone. I was sure that I had seen it was taking us back to the highway and that the next turn was a right in about 30 minutes or so, given our current speed. But with the evidence to the contrary quickly approaching me in the darkness, illuminated by my headlights, I made the single most critical mistake that I would regret for the rest of my life. I followed the street sign and turned left. Mel leaned back in her seat, embarking again on her quest for a comfortable position, and I continued to stare at the lines in the road as we passed. Time begins to lose meaning when you've been on the road in the dark for as long as we were that night. It could have been hours that we spent speeding straight down the desert road, or it could have been days. With no focal point, it was really up to the clock alone to tell us how long we'd been there, and the clock on the dashboard had inexplicably reset at some point, something it did on occasion for most of the time I'd owned the car. My faith in the phone had begun to waver even further, as I was becoming sure even that clock was running slow somehow. We'd drove for 5 or 6 miles according to the odometer, and the clock would read only a minute or two had passed. I drained the last bit of Red Bull down my throat, again promising myself nothing but clean eating after this trip was over. Moments later, I felt a dull pressure in my bowels. The last drop of liquid must have been the last straw for my bladder. Mel slept quietly next to me, having finally crashed a while back, and I made the second decision I would come to regret. Although we hadn't seen another car for miles, I flipped my hazard lights on and pulled over to the side of the road. I turned off the car and stepped out and relieved myself, relishing one of the finer points of being a man and having the ability to take a leak in the middle of the road without much fanfare. Mel stirred then and asked if we were there yet. Not yet, just a bit further, had to take a leak. She rolled her eyes and closed them again. I turned the key to start the car back up and heard a sound that sunk my heart into my stomach. Click, 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 click. Oh, shit, I said under my breath. Please don't do this. I turned the key again and once more heard the series of clicks telling me that my car didn't have enough power to start. Fuck, I sighed, resting my head against the steering wheel in defeat. What's wrong? Mel asked, opening one eye. The battery's dead. What? There was a hint of panic in her voice and she sat back up, totally awake now. Yeah, it was running off of the alternator. The battery needs just enough power to start, then the car can run off of the power generated by the alternator. All we need is a jump, and we should be able to get the rest of the way, as long as we don't turn the car off. But who's gonna jump us? Mel asked. It's been a while, I admitted. Definitely not since we made that turn back there. Fuck, Mel spat. Fuck. Stay here, I said, unbuckling my seatbelt. Where are you going? She asked, the panic in her voice arising. Just up there, I said, pointing down the road. I think I see a sign maybe 100 yards out there. It might give us an idea of which direction we need to go, or if we need to just wait until the sun comes up. She nodded. I'll keep my flashlight on so you can see where I am. I'll just go there, then straight back. Unless I see a Denny's. Then you're on your own. She flipped me off. I kissed her cheek and stepped out into the night. The air was brisk, despite having been downright hot during the day. I shivered and hugged my arms around my torso. As I approached, I realized it wasn't the kind of sign I was hoping for. It was made of cracked wood that looked just a little better than the sign for the church we'd seen a while back. Painted in white letters, it read, Gomper's Farm, above a crudely drawn arrow pointing down a dirt path to the right. My gaze followed the arrow, and I thought I could see a light far off in the distance. A scream broke through the darkness that turned my blood to ice. "Mel?" I called, wheeling around and bolting back the way I came. "Melanie?" I could see the shape of the car in the distance, but it was too far away from my flashlight to do much good. I sprinted down the road, screaming my wife's name in a hot panic. "What? What?" Melanie called back, alarmed. I slowed when I heard her voice and held the light up again. She was standing on the passenger side of the car with the door open. "I thought I heard you screaming," I said through heaving breaths. She looked around, confused. "No? You didn't hear that?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, I don't think so. I was in the car until I heard you yelling, though." "I don't know," I said, shaking my head and spitting the bitter flavor of adrenaline into the dirt. "Maybe it was an animal or something," she suggested. "What did the sign say?" "There's a farmhouse or something about a mile down the road, I think. It's not exactly ideal, but if I jog it, I could make it in about 10 minutes or so." She mulled it over for a moment. Then I saw the resolve on her face, and I knew what was coming next. "I'm going with you, then." I didn't like it, but I could tell that arguing wasn't going to get me anywhere but the doghouse. And considering the scream I heard, I preferred having her close. "Fine," I agreed. "Grab your jacket, though. I'm gonna grab mine and a couple of water bottles from the back." A moment later, we were hiking down the road, our silhouettes illuminated intermittently by the orange hazard lights we'd elected to leave on. I doubted the battery would last if those lights were on too long. Mel had thought to leave a note on the windshield telling whomever found it that we'd gone to the farmhouse. Hopefully, they'd stick around long enough to help. There was a cool breeze that played with our hair as we walked. Not uncomfortable, but enough to make me zip my jacket up just a bit more. Mel held the only flashlight we had, and the beam bounced up and down in the darkness like a buoy. The car was barely visible when Mel shrieked so suddenly I nearly tripped on my own foot. "What? What?" I asked, suddenly panicked. "Look," she said, extending her finger past the head of the flashlight. "What?" "It's gone now. You didn't see it?" No, I was too busy asking myself why I'm hiking with a pregnant banshee. "There's something out there," she said, ignoring my jab. "Just past that rock. I saw a pair of golden eyes." "Probably a coyote," I said, starting to walk again. "They're cowards. If we keep walking and talking, nothing should bug us, especially if we stick to the road here." Mel nodded, then caught up to me. "How much longer do you think it'll be till we get to the farm?" "Don't know," I shrugged. 10 or 15 minutes, maybe? Just then, I saw the eyes she was talking about. Out in the distance, next to a large boulder on the side of the road, sat a pair of curious golden eyes. "Definitely a coyote," I said, pointing at it. "You can see its shape a bit. All fours, low to the ground. It looks like it might be a little bit bigger than the ones I've seen." We kept talking as we walked down the path, closer to the eyes, tired, and when they disappeared, I was a bit disappointed, but not surprised. Part of me wanted to see the coyote up close, but if we got close enough to see it, that probably meant we were close to a den. We talked about what we'd do when we finally got home and how soon we'd find ourselves laughing about the whole ordeal. The walk was long and difficult for Mel, but eventually we saw the farmhouse's silhouette against the horizon. It wasn't huge, but it looked livable, and more importantly, there was light. "Thank God," Mel muttered, squeezing my arm. "At least someone's awake." We quickened our pace, gravel crunching beneath our feet, until the dirt road opened up to the yard of the property. The house looked old, but cared for. Paint peeled in spots, but the porch light glowed warmly. A rocking chair creaked slightly in the breeze. We climbed the steps and I knocked on the door. It was late, so I half expected no one to answer. But a few moments later, the door creaked open and an older man appeared. Tall, broad-shouldered, with thinning gray hair. "Well now," he said, "what brings y'all out here this late?" "Sorry to bother you," I said quickly. "Our car died out on the road. My wife's 7 months pregnant. We just need some help getting it jumped." The man's eyes softened. Then he nodded. "Name's Arthur. Y'all better come inside first. Roads aren't safe at night." From behind him, a woman's voice chimed. "Who is it?" "Travelers," Arthur called back. The woman appeared, petite, with sharp eyes, maybe a little younger than Arthur. "I'm Ruthie," she said, eyeing us up and down. "You poor things. Come inside." Mel glanced at me, then back at Ruthie, then stepped into the house. I followed. The interior was odd. Old wallpaper, mismatched furniture, the faint smell of dust and something herbal. But it was warm, and after hours on the cold road, that felt like heaven. Arthur shut the door firmly behind us, sliding the lock into place. Ruthie ushered Mel toward a couch, fussing over her like an anxious aunt. 7 months, my Lord. You shouldn't be out here walking. Sit. Arthur gestured at me. "You want some tea? Help take the chill off?" I hesitated, but Mel gave me a look, the kind that said, "Don't be rude." "Sure," I said. Arthur disappeared into the kitchen, and soon the faint whistle of a kettle filled the silence. Ruthie sat across from us, folding her hands in her lap, her eyes never leaving Mel. "Boy or girl?" she asked. "Boy," Mel said softly. Ruthie smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Strong name picked out yet?" "We've got a few," I said carefully. Just then, Arthur returned with 2 mugs of steaming tea. He handed one to me and one to Mel. "Drink up. Long road ahead." The tea smelled strong, earthy, not like the bagged stuff I was used to. I took a small sip, trying not to grimace. Mel lifted hers too, but didn't drink right away. Arthur sat heavily in his chair, staring at us with a strange smile. "Not many folk come down our road. Signs don't usually send them this way." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. I forced a smile. "Yeah, weird detour. Phone kept losing signal." Arthur chuckled. "Phones don't work right out here. They get confused." Ruthie tilted her head. "Best to listen to the signs. That's what they're there for." The room felt smaller somehow, the air thicker. I set the mug down on the table, only half drunk. Mel shifted uncomfortably beside me, one hand on her belly. Arthur leaned forward. "So, your car. We'll take a look in the morning. Roads at night ain't safe." I frowned. "But it's just a battery. I can walk back with you." Ruthie cut me off sharply. "Morning." The finality in her voice silenced me. Arthur leaned back again, as if nothing had happened, sipping his tea slowly. We sat in uneasy quiet, the only sound the faint creak of the rocking chair outside. Mel whispered to me, almost too softly to hear, "I don't like this." I squeezed her hand under the blanket Ruthie had draped over her. "It's fine," I whispered back. "We'll be okay." Arthur's eyes lingered on me, like he'd heard every word. I took another gulp of tea, trying to get the mug down at least halfway, and agreed.